Hey guys, Rob Skiba here. So I get a lot of emails, and I definitely don't have time to respond to the vast majority of them, but I really do make an effort to try to at least read them, especially if they're not too long. And the same goes for Facebook messages. But um, well, I just recently took another turn down an interesting passageway in the rabbit hole. It started with a friend on Facebook sending me this picture of an Irish megalithic rock art symbol for the firmament. I know there are a number of people in the Flat Earth movement who are adamantly opposed to the dome. Frankly, I think they have to ignore way too much textual and visual depictions from the ancient world, of course, also backed by good modern scholarship recognizing these things in order to maintain their view, but whatever. To each their own, right? But for me, for me to be an honest researcher, I've got to be willing to look at the evidence, and it seems everywhere I turn, I see someone in the ancient world either writing about the firmament or depicting it, usually as a dome, which of course would be the most logical shape to place over the biblical circle of the earth. So, yeah, I believe that if we are on a circular, flat-ish plane set on pillars under a firmament, that it is in fact a dome. Now, how high the dome goes or how far out it extends to the edges, that's anybody's guess right now. Unless, of course, we look at the interesting evidence surrounding Antarctica and the various missions that Admiral Byrd went on down there and others. Of course, we have Operation Deep Freeze. That's when a lot of people are down there in Antarctica. And then something happens, and everybody sort of pulls out of there. And then they sign this Antarctic Treaty. And very shortly thereafter, NASA's formed, just getting started right around the 1958 time frame or so. And then right away, you've got the United States and Russia. All of a sudden, they start blowing off high-altitude nukes, and the U.S. calls it Operation Fishbowl, which was part of the larger Project Dominic. And I've told you in previous broadcasts, I believe I talked about it in the Sending Thor to Smash the Firmament video, that I had learned that Dominic, the name Dominic, means of the Lord. So Operation Fishbowl being part of the larger Project Dominic, literally would be translated as Fishbowl of the Lord. So then, okay, after leaving Antarctica and shooting nuclear missiles up into the Fishbowl of the Lord, we find ourselves in the space race. Now, I'm going to pull something up here. This is part of my Testing the Globe blog series under the title of Gearing Up for Apollo, and I haven't been able to work on this in months. It's kind of where I left off, and I didn't publish this one yet, so I'll just kind of look at it here in Dreamweaver. This is it's going to be part 4, The Beast Goes South, and I've still got quite a bit to work on that one, though. But let me just skip down a little bit here to right about here. Okay. This is where things start to get a little crazy. Now, prior to this, I'm showing a timeline and everything, and basically saying what I just said. Admiral Byrd dies in 1957. Sputnik is launched. The United States completes 6 high-altitude nuclear tests in 1958. Kennedy makes his announcement about us going to the moon in 1961. Then in 1962, more high-altitude tests were performed, and they called it Operation Fishbowl. Seriously? If they're trying to keep us from looking at things as a conspiracy, they really should have tried different names. And of course, when I wrote this was before I knew what Dominic meant, so I'll have to add that to this blog. But it's as if they are literally baiting us to think the way I'm now thinking. I mean, just look at the mission names and expedition titles and the chronology we have listed so far. It's crazy. Meanwhile, the Antarctic expeditions continued. I want to focus on this one right here, 1955-1957, the first Soviet Antarctic expedition led by Mikhail Somov. The year of 1957 to 1958, from June 57 to December 58, was known as the International Geophysical Year, which came out of an international resolution established in 1954, the desire of which was for a nation to launch a satellite into space in order to observe the Earth and take other space-based scientific observations. The first nation to accomplish this goal would win a prize, hence the space race began. The winner would thus be recognized as the most technologically advanced. Obviously, the two most likely candidates to even make a reasonable attempt at this goal were the United States and the Soviet Union. On October 4th, 1957, Sputnik was launched, and Russia was the first to achieve the goal of putting an artificial satellite up into space. This, of course, terrified the United States. On November 3rd, 1957, a second Sputnik satellite was sent up. This one was larger and heavier than the first one, and it also contained a dog, which became the first living creature to be sent into orbit. This heavier payload thus proved the Soviets' ability to place something large, such as, a nuclear warhead, atop a rocket and send it high into the atmosphere, and presumably far across the world to hit us. On December 6, 1957, the United States attempted to launch a Vanguard rocket into space. It blew up on the launch pad. Another launch was quickly prepared, this time with the Explorer satellite, which was a radiation detection probe developed by Dr. James Van Allen. It would be put atop von Braun's Juno rocket, which launched on January 31st, 1958. America thus finally entered the space race, and the Van Allen radiation belt was soon discovered. NASA was formed on October 1st, 1958. The Vanguard 1 satellite was also successfully launched, but the United States was still quite far behind in the space race. Then President John F. Kennedy took the Oval Office, and things were about to change in radical ways. While the United States was setting its sights on beating the Russians in space, trips to Antarctica continued, most notably by the Soviets. We see from 1956 to 1958 we have a second Soviet Antarctic expedition. Then we have from 1957 to 1959 the third Soviet Antarctic expedition, from 58 to 60 the fourth, from 59 to 51 the fifth, and from 1960 to 1962 the sixth. And I made it to be continued here because I was going to continue it in the fifth installment in the Gearing Up for Apollo series. But the point is, we were racing for space, and then we beat the Soviets, and so what? The Soviets just gave up? They said, no need to do anything else. Okay, so we're done. Well, no. They went ahead and took off for Antarctica and continued to do more and more missions down there, while we started doing the whole facade of the Apollo program. Yes, I am now fully convinced that we did not go to the moon, and if you're not on that page yet, well, you've got some homework to do. A funny thing happened to the moon is probably a good place to start. Astronauts Gone Wild. There's lots of different videos out there debunking the Apollo program. But even if you don't believe all those conspiracy videos that are out there, NASA's doing a pretty good job of debunking themselves. Yeah, they discovered the Van Allen belt and supposedly sent astronauts through the thing 12 times, through 6 round trips. But yet they can't figure out the radiation problem with the Orion project here in the 21st century with all our modern technology.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
What?
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
One more time.
An area of dangerous radiation.
Oh. What's wrong with that radiation?
Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice. Once up and once back.
That doesn't sound good.
Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice. Once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
What? We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space? I thought this problem was solved over 40 years ago when he sent a bunch of people in jumpsuits and tin cans through it there and back a half dozen times. But I forgot. The Apollo guys, they were clueless regarding the radiation belt. It didn't affect them.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And then we build it that way.
I help manage the Orion Crew and Service Module Office. We're responsible for developing the crew capsule, which is where the crew lives and works when they're in space, and the service module, which is what provides the power and the fuel and the consumables then that is plumbed over to the crew module. So right now I focus a lot of my time on the development of the life support system for the Orion Crew module. Space puts us in a different environment. When we're here on Earth, we don't realize every day we're protected by the environment around us. Our bodies are at a certain pressure, we're protected by the natural radiation shield of the Earth, and when we go out into space and we don't have that natural protection, then the engineering and the spacecraft have to provide that protection for us. We don't have the ultimate answer for radiation on Orion. We're still working on that. If we were to build Orion out of the materials we need and the sole job was to protect for the radiation environment, the vehicle would really be too heavy. So we have to balance the weight of the materials that we put on the spacecraft with how much protection it's providing the crew. So we're really looking at it from an operational perspective. If we understand a radiation event has happened, the crew will actually take shelter in the aft bay of the vehicle, which is kind of down in the back end. And we'll use some of the stowage things that are around them in that back end to kind of protect them from the radiation. We have found over the years that water is a really great radiation absorbing material. So we could do things like water that's already there in the water bags for drinking and things like that. That water could be used to shield them. As well as we've had some concepts like a water-filled vest that they could put on should they know there's an event and need to be protected.
We don't have a clue when it comes to like how to protect them from like radiation. So we're gonna just like put them up there in like water suits. Yeah, we like water suits, and like if we put water all around them, so the radiation could go like into the water, and then they could drink it, and it could be like a Fantastic Four. Everybody they'll come back and be mutants when they get back. But we just got some ideas, Yeah. But don't worry about it. Yeah, I know there are refugees everywhere, and like people are starving and stuff, and like we have homeless all over the place. But if we spend like a few $1 trillion, I think we should be able to figure out how to make water suits for the astronauts in space, and then maybe it'll work out like it did for the guys in Apollo.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
We went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
Didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
Yeah, if you pretend that it's not really there, then you can just go right through it. So apparently you had this magic window of time, because now Orion's still very much concerned about it. We've got to solve this challenge before we can put people through it. And yet even before Mercury and Gemini, they were very concerned about it and trying to figure out how to solve the problem, as evidenced in this Smithsonian.com article. News of the hot band of peril immediately cast doubt on whether Laika, the Russian dog, would have been able to survive for a week in space aboard Sputnik 2, as the Soviets claimed in November of 1957. The Soviets said that after 6 days, the dog's oxygen ran out and he was euthanized with poisoned food. It was later learned that Laika, the first live animal to be launched into space, died just hours after the launch from overheating and stress when a malfunction in the capsule caused the temperature to rise. What Van Allen had discovered were the bands of high-energy particles that were held in place by strong magnetic fields and soon known as the Van Allen belts. A year later, he appeared on the cover of Time magazine as he opened an entirely new field of research, magnetospheric physics, and catapulted the United States into the race to space with the Soviet Union. On the same day Van Allen held his press conference in May 1958, he agreed to cooperate with the United States military on a top-secret project. The plan? To send atomic bombs into space in an attempt to blow up the Van Allen belts, or to at least disrupt them with a massive blast of nuclear energy. Okay, guys, read up on this stuff. All right, this is Smithsonian.com. Check that out. There's another good article on NPR. You can look up a very scary light show, exploding H-bombs in space, where they talk about this, and they got a video here showing footage of Operation Fishbowl, which is a very interesting title for after they find something in Antarctica, which the flat earthers would say is the outer rim of the circle of the Earth, and everybody pulls out. All of a sudden, NASA's created, and right after that, they start shooting up rockets into space with nuclear warheads on them, and this is what you start seeing with Operation Fishbowl. Operation Fishbowl. Really? I mean, it looks like they found something in Antarctica, and they said, oh, what is this? Wonder how high it is. How high does this thing go? And they start blowing off nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. Now, were they doing that because they were testing the firmament? Were they trying to blast through the firmament? Or is it about the Van Allen belt with the radiation? Is that the problem? I don't know. This article goes on to describe, again, the Van Allen energy belts and what they came to understand about them, and discover it, then blow it up. The plan was to send rockets hundreds of miles up, higher than the Earth's atmosphere, and then detonate nuclear weapons to see, A, if a bomb's radiation would make it harder to see what was up there, like incoming Russian missiles, B, if an explosion would do any damage to objects nearby, C, if the Van Allen belts would move a blast down the bands to an earthly target, Moscow, for example, and most peculiar, D, if a man-made explosion might alter the natural shape of the belts. The scientific basis for these proposals is not clear. Fleming is trying to figure out if Van Allen had any theoretical reason to suppose the military could use the Van Allen belts to attack a hostile nation. He supposes that at the height of the Cold War, the most pressing argument for a military experiment was, if we don't do it, the Russians will. And indeed, the Russians did test atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs in space. No big surprise, they were also down there in Antarctica prior. And oh, by the way, while we supposedly got ahead of them and started to beat them in the alleged space race, you know, we're led to believe they just, we lost and they gave up. No, they sent something like 40 missions down to Antarctica while we were playing around with the so-called Apollo space program. So something's going on here, and these psychopaths, you know, they look up there, they see something, oh, that looks cool, let's blow it up. Oh, we don't really think it's important, even though they have admitted that they know it's there for our protection. Why do we put our fate into the hands of monkey men? These people think they came from monkeys, for crying out loud, and they hold within their grasp technology that could make life for us here on Earth very bad when they do things like they're attempting to do at CERN, to rip holes in the fabric of time and space and recreate what they think is the Big Bang, opening up portals to interdimensional, realms. And now keep in mind, these monkey men think that the whole universe got here when a microscopic dot exploded. So what are they doing? They're slamming microscopic dots together, trying to recreate the Big Bang. I don't really think it takes a very high IQ to think that through. Wait a minute. You think we got here from a microscopic dot exploding, and now you're slamming microscopic dots together, trying to explode them and recreate the Big Bang. Hello? Guys, maybe there's a reason why they put the Hindu god Shiva, the god of destruction, dancing in a portal outside their front freaking door. Bunch of lunatics. And meanwhile, elsewhere, a bunch of other lunatic psychopaths are thinking they can poke holes or blow up the Van Allen belt, the very thing that's up there, put there for our protection. People out there thinking I'm crazy.
Also of note, we have all these satellites up there supposedly orbiting the Earth, providing us with GPS, right? GPS coverage. That's what they say. That's what people all believe. I'm now convinced that GPS is all completely ground-based, but regardless, we supposedly have all these thousands of satellites up there, and yet even NASA, they can't even track their own stuff over the so-called Southern Hemisphere.